In this video, we're going to talk about Chapter 3 and about getting to know your students. And this is one of my favorite chapters in this book, and actually about teaching in general, is to get to know your students and what they really know, what they love, what they, their interests, all kinds of different things. So it's really important to do that with reading too. So what is learning about students' reading lives? What does that even mean to you? That might be a little bit foreign. So just think about that for a little bit. You should have already read about it in the book, in our textbook. But one reason I have you think about this is, it's really important to get to know your students in all areas, not just for reading, because everything they've done in their background, everything that they've experienced, done in their lives, it all impacts who they are and how they learn. And so that is a really important thing as a teacher to know how to do, not just with reading, but with everything. So how would you go about doing this in your own class? There are a lot of examples given in this chapter, which is really wonderful. There's a lot. If the textbook that you got came with the CD, there are actually forms that are on the CD that will be helpful if you just want to print those off or make them into a Google form. I have actually went ahead and made Form 6 and Form 10 into a Google form, and we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. So getting to know your students has a lot to do with just listening to them, giving them little surveys, giving them things to write about. You can make a list together as a class. You can do lots of things. You can have even the parents give you information too. But it's important at this age that the middle school students have a lot of control over the information, so it's best to get it directly from them. Let's see, and when you learn about students' lives, you need to really value that out-of-school reading and out-of-school literacy, because a lot of kids will probably read a lot of things that you don't think of as very academic, but it does contribute to who they are as a reader, so it is important. Okay, for this session, you should have already read and thought about your kind of middle school readers. Two of the small groups have two different sections of readers because we only have small groups, but I try to divide that evenly, and so the next 5 slides is where you will collaborate with your small group members, and you'll fill in these slides with the information that is posted on the expectations for this session. So I'm just going to skip over that so you guys can present about that in our class during class time. Here are some of those really great strategies for getting to know your students, and the author does a good job of explaining all of those, but let's just talk about some of them a little bit more in detail. This form you can give to your students. It's called What is Easy or What is Hard About Reading. And it's very important for you as a teacher to actually model these things in front of the students, because they might think, well, it's easy to decode words. It's easy to look at the pictures. I mean, they might be very, very shallow in their answers. So it's good for you to go ahead and model that for them first, and then they can do it as well. This will give you a lot of insight into a student's background knowledge. Do they talk about reading lots of different books? Do they talk about finding new series? That's really easy, or even that's really hard. And what this information will give you is kind of an insight into many lessons that you can teach later. If you have a lot of kids that really struggle with picking out books that they love, then that's a mini lesson that you can focus on. Another thing that modeling in front of the students does is it helps them to understand that you really want them to be honest. When you ask a student, what is hard about this, instead of saying, oh, you can do it, just do this for me, it really does invite them to be honest, and that's important as you develop those relationships with your students, for them to see you a little bit vulnerable in front of them, and it makes you become real. And so it can also help you to get to know them in a very honest way, so you can determine their needs on an individual basis. The next the next little bit, the next section of forms to get to know students, there's one called the 10 questions form, and I actually linked it on this session. I linked it on this presentation, and so after this class period, I think session 4, after session 4, you are actually going to be responsible for filling out one of these as yourself. I mean, as if you are the person you are now, not a 7th grader or a 6th grader. But so if you click on one of these, it'll just come up with the form that I've created. So it's really just directly from the author's form as well. So I'm going to get to know you as a reader, and I'm going to fill this out as well, so we can talk about who we are as individual readers in our classroom. And if you notice, 4 words that pop into your mind when you think of reading, I mean, those could really give you insight. Choose one of those words and explain why you connect it to a reading, so it not only gives them a chance to give information, but to explain themselves. And you can see a little bit about their writing as well. And how do you choose a book for enjoyment? If you'll notice, I'm expecting, or the author of this is expecting them to enjoy books, but the possibility lies in the fact that they might say they don't. I don't choose a book for enjoyment because that's not what I enjoy. But that gives you information as a teacher as well. So I think everything, even if it's a negative response, gives you some information to help your students. Approximately how many books, what strategies, kids might not even know what strategies are. What do you do when you read a section and remember little or nothing? So that'll tell you whether they go back and reread or they just go on. When you finish a book, what do you do? As a reader, what do you consider your strong points? And some kids might think, I don't have any idea. But again, that will give you information. Your favorite genre, do you enjoy discussing your reading? So those are just 10 questions about reading. And the other one is a similar survey, but it's different, a little bit different. Do you read at home? How often? So maybe it's a little bit more personal. So it talks about owning a library card and the different types of genres that you enjoy. And so you can choose one of those 2 forms to fill out by the end of the week, Friday midnight. So I've already talked about those. The next type of form that you can use to get to know your students is called the I used to but now I can form, or the I used to and I still form. And these 2 things are a self-evaluation done by the student of their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's important to think about, you know, how reflective are these students as readers? Think about the reflections that you do now for like lessons or for projects that you do. There's a lot of learning that goes on in that reflective process. So it's important that you give students the opportunities to do that as well. So again, you might need to model that for them. They won't understand about, you know, how can I think about what I'm good about in reading? So you need to do both strengths and challenges as well. And the last type of evaluation, so this kind of goes back to that last one we were just talking about, but the self-evaluations that students can do, and they can be writing prompts, they can be, a lot of it has to do with writing. They're self-evaluations, and you can give them a, you know, kind of brainstorm some things with them about how they can be, how they can evaluate themselves. And you can just think about these questions. What comes from having students reflect over their reading, and what type of evaluation do you think is the most effective and gives the most useful information for you as a teacher? So we'll talk about that in class. If you'll think about that and kind of come with some thoughts and some questions, we can discuss that further. In the last part of this chapter, if you'll notice, I told you to skip over some of the middle part because we just don't have enough time to talk about it all. But the last part of the chapter I think is really important because the author makes a big deal about getting to know students really is assessment. You're assessing the student, their interests, their wants, their needs, all the things about them in order to help you plan for instruction. So when some people say you spend a week or 2 weeks getting to know your students at the beginning of the year, and you say, absolutely I do, because it helps me be a better teacher in order to meet their needs. And so lots of different ways to do that. Daily observations, you might carry around a clipboard and write little notes to yourself or your iPad and jot down things. Students' behavior notes. If you ask them questions, whole class questions or just small group questions, that gives a lot of information. It's really just a lot of observation. Reactions during learning situations, you'll get to know your students that way. Are they easily frustrated? Are they excited, enthusiastic? Conferences, those are one-on-one things where you can get to know a student on an individual basis a lot better. You might have checklists or benchmark things that your school district mandates that you do. Of course, tests and quizzes, those are the normal assessments. Journaling and analytical writing, those self-evaluations that students do about themselves. And then also oral presentations, if they do book talks or readers theater. All of these things can be used to assess the student where they are. And so I just want to reiterate the point that student assessment, or getting to know your students, is a valid type of assessment. And don't forget to fill out your form by the end of Friday of this week. Thank you.